The hum of the Boeing 777's engines was supposed to be my sanctuary for the next 5 hours. It was a predictable, controlled environment, a perfect buffer between the data-driven certainty of my Chicago office and the calculated networking of the Ascend Tech conference in San Francisco. I had my noise-canceling headphones, a tablet loaded with market analysis reports, and a window seat in first class, a small luxury my company afforded its department managers. My world was one of logistics, of predictable inputs and measurable outputs. Surprises were inefficiencies, and I had built my career on eliminating them. Then she sat down next to me. She moved with a fluid energy that defied the cramped cabin. Her dark hair was cut in a stylish, asymmetrical bob, and she wore a soft gray blazer over a simple white tee, an effortlessly chic look. She smiled quickly at the flight attendant, warming the air around her. I felt an immediate, irrational twinge of irritation. She was an anomaly, a variable I hadn't accounted for. I turned pointedly to my tablet, hoping my headphones would deter her. They didn't. A light tap on my arm. I looked up to find her holding her own headphones, her hazel eyes apologetic. "Sorry to bother you," she said, her voice a low, pleasant alto. "I just saw the cover of that journal peeking out of your bag, the FinTech Quarterly. Are you reading the piece on decentralized asset management?" I blinked. It was exactly the article I'd bookmarked. "I am," I replied, my tone cooler than intended. "It's a follow-up to their Q2 report on blockchain integration." Her face lit up. "I thought so. Their projections are aggressive, but their foundational logic is solid. Though I think they're underestimating cultural resistance in legacy banking." In an instant, the carefully polished wall I'd built showed a tiny crack. For the next hour, we didn't discuss weather or travel plans. We dissected algorithmic trading, debated AI's future in consumer branding, and sketched competing supply chain disruption theories on a cocktail napkin. Her name was Nora, department manager in brand strategy for a New York creative agency. Our fields were adjacent yet distinct. She spoke of consumers in narratives and emotional connections. I spoke in predictive analytics and behavioral patterns. Yet we reached the same conclusions. She listened with a slight tilt of her head, her focus so intense it made you feel your words mattered more than the 30,000-foot altitude or recycled air. She didn't just hear, she engaged, built, challenged. It was like finding a sparring partner I never knew I needed. "It's about authenticity," she argued, swirling ice in her club soda. "You can have all the data in the world, Quinn," she said, using my name with an ease that should have annoyed me but didn't. "But if your story doesn't resonate humanly, it's just noise. And authenticity without a viable market is just a hobby," I countered, a small smile escaping despite myself. "You need both the story and the strategy to deliver it." "Exactly," she said, eyes gleaming. "A partnership. Art and science." As a flight attendant cleared our glasses, silence fell. I became acutely aware of our proximity, the faint, clean scent of her sandalwood and bergamot perfume, the brush of her sleeve against my arm. It was a new kind of data point, one my internal algorithms couldn't process. This easy connection felt dangerous. Intimacy, even intellectual, was a risk, and I no longer took risks. "The Ascend Tech conference?" she asked, pulling me from my thoughts. "I'm giving a talk Saturday. The psychology of brand loyalty." My composure faltered. "I'm on a panel Friday. Logistics in the digital age." She laughed, a genuine, throaty sound that felt both out of place and perfect. "Of course you are. What are the odds?" I didn't believe in odds. I believed in statistics. The probability of me, Quinn Riley, who scheduled life in 15-minute increments, connecting so effortlessly with a stranger on a plane was statistically impossible. Yet here we were. As the plane began its descent into San Francisco, I felt an unnerving sense that I was entering uncharted territory with useless maps. San Francisco greeted us with cool mist. We parted at baggage claim with polite pleasantries. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Nora." "You too, Quinn. Maybe I'll see you around." Standard networking fare, but as I watched her disappear into the crowd, I felt a strange anticlimax, a loose thread in my tightly woven life. The first conference day blurred with lanyards, lukewarm coffee, and forced smiles. I navigated the convention center efficiently, collecting business cards and noting competitors' platforms. It was my element. Structured, transactional, emotionally sterile. I was focused until I saw the main event schedule. Saturday's 10 a.m. keynote, The Human Algorithm, Forging Connection in a Disconnected World. Speaker, Nora Vance. Of course. Friday's panel went smoothly. I presented my analysis on predictive AI for inventory management, fielding questions with calm authority. But as I stepped off stage, my eyes scanned the crowd, half expecting, half dreading to see her. I didn't. The next morning, I sat in the back of the main auditorium, telling myself it was strategic to understand industry narratives. Nora's talk was just data. But when she walked on stage, the room shifted. This wasn't a relaxed woman from the plane. This was Nora Vance, industry leader. She commanded the space with quiet, confident passion, speaking of brands as relationships, not corporate entities. She used words like trust, vulnerability, and connection, concepts I'd relegated to messy personal life. Data can tell you what customers are doing, she said, voice resonating, but not why. The why lives here. She tapped her chest. In the stories we tell ourselves, the values we share. That's the human algorithm. It's not code. It's connection. I leaned forward, hanging on every word. She wove art and science together, articulating what I'd intuitively known but dismissed as too sentimental for business. Watching her, I felt a disquieting mix of professional respect and something unnameable, thrilling, terrifying, like being seen. After the applause died down, I slipped out a side door, but her voice stopped me. Quinn. She hurried toward me, smile softening into the warmth I remembered. I hoped I'd see you. What did you think? Was I underestimating legacy sectors? You were compelling, I admitted, the word feeling inadequate. Your thesis was well supported. She laughed. Spoken like a true analyst. Let me buy you coffee. I want to hear the real verdict. We found a small cafe away from the crowds. Conversation picked up where it left off on the plane. I opened up about my philosophy. Logistical efficiency and customer trust were symbiotic. A perfectly timed delivery wasn't just speed, it was reliability, a promise kept, corporate integrity. That's it, she said, eyes alight. You see logistics as communication. I never framed it that way, but she was right. I'd spent years building error-free systems, never considering their purpose was to foster trust, a human feeling. My last partner, I heard myself say, words slipping out, saw it all as numbers. Profit maximization. We clashed on fundamentals. I kept it vague, a edited version of deep betrayal, more than I'd shared with anyone, let alone someone I'd known 48 hours. Nora didn't press. She just nodded, her quiet empathy more comforting than words. It's hard to build something meaningful when you're following different blueprints. The line between my professional and personal worlds, one I'd policed fiercely, was dissolving. And for the first time in years, I wasn't sure I wanted to redraw it. The universe had a flair for drama. On the conference's final day, as I mentally packed for Chicago, a biblical storm hit San Francisco, grounding all flights indefinitely. Closing ceremonies were canceled. The conference was over. I stood in the hotel lobby, staring at my phone's sea of red, canceled notifications, when Nora appeared beside me. She held a rain-spattered umbrella, clearly beaten by the wind. Looks like we're grounded, she said, amused. An unforeseen logistical collapse, I muttered, frustration evident. My entire next week was unraveling. Or an unscheduled opportunity, she countered, eyes sparkling. I've always wanted to see Muir Woods. They say the trees are so old, they don't care about the weather. The idea was absurd. Driving into a storm to look at trees? Inefficient, impractical, illogical. Roads will be treacherous. Visibility poor. We're not dressed for this. I have a rental SUV, four-wheel drive, she said, waving off concerns. The hotel gift shop sells overpriced rain ponchos.
Come on, Quinn.
Where's your sense of adventure? My sense of adventure had been replaced by risk assessment matrices years ago. But as I looked at her unscripted enthusiasm, something shifted. I'd spent life planning for the predictable. Nora thrived on the unexpected.
I wanted to understand that.
Fine, I said, the word foreign. But I'm driving. An hour later, we crossed the Golden Gate Bridge, its red towers vanishing into gray mist. The storm had softened to a steady drizzle. Nora's flimsy ponchos crackled with every step. Muir Woods was hushed cathedral-like. Rain-dampened earth smelled rich and loamy. Fresh air felt cleansing. Ancient redwoods soared above, trunks like pillars of a forgotten temple. The city, the conference, my tightly wound thoughts, all faded into rain on leaves. We walked in comfortable silence, footsteps on the boardwalk and water dripping from ferns the only sounds. Our corporate armor was washed away. We weren't managers, just two people, dwarfed by the forest's ancient wisdom. My parents wanted me to be a lawyer, Nora said softly. They saw my creativity as a phase. For years, I tried to prove them wrong, loud, unignorable. It was exhausting. Her admission resonated. I thought of my own drive for perfection, my unassailable exterior. I'd called it ambition, but it was a defense mechanism. My first project with my former partner, Mark, I began, voice quiet. It was my idea, my code, my analytics platform. I brought him in for connections, charisma. He convinced me to put his name first on the patent. Strategic, he said. I was young. I trusted him. I paused, staring at moss on a fallen log. When we got our first major investment, he took it, pushed me out with a check that barely covered student loans. Said it was just business. I didn't need to say more. Nora understood the wound wasn't about money. It was about betrayed trust. Some trees only grow after a fire, she said, gaze on the canopy. The heat forces their seeds to open. We stood side by side, watching mist curl around trunks. A fragile, unspoken understanding settled between us, forged not in boardrooms, but in rain-soaked woods, surrounded by centuries-old life. When we turned back, the silence was full of new, terrifying possibility. The flight back to Chicago was a study in contrasts. The storm had passed, leaving a brilliant blue sky and smooth flight. But inside, turbulence lingered. Nora and I had said goodbye at the airport, professional distance slipping back easily. Yet the memory of Muir Woods stayed with me. In my minimalist apartment, with its clean lines and city views, I tried to slot San Francisco into a successful business trip box. It refused to fit. The silence felt empty, not peaceful. I replayed our conversations, analyzing them like data sets. Intellectual spark on the plane, professional respect at the conference, vulnerability in the woods. Each point led to a conclusion I wasn't ready to face. I threw myself into work, diagnostics, shipping routes, predictive models, until numbers blurred. Work was my fortress built on logic. Feelings were messy variables that corrupted systems. I'd learned that the hard way. A week passed. Nora's memory faded like a dream. For the best, I told myself. She was in New York, a charismatic strategist. I was in Chicago, a pragmatic analyst. Our orbits had crossed briefly, but returned to stable trajectories. Then, an email arrived from Nora Vance. My heart lurched. I opened it, hand unsteady. Subject line: following up on San Francisco Airport.
Quinn,
I hope your week is productive. I've been thinking about our conversation, the intersection of narrative and delivery. The idea of logistics as brand integrity has stuck with me. I've attached a rough concept, a platform integrating real-time, transparent supply chain tracking with a compelling consumer brand story, the journey of your product. Ambitious, maybe crazy. I remembered you mentioned your company wants to innovate in customer-facing tech. Perhaps our departments could explore this as a low-risk, cross-company project. Let me know your thoughts.
Best. Nora.
I read it 3 times. It was a brilliant business proposal, innovative, aligned with my company's goals. But I knew, with gut-wrenching certainty, it was so much more. A thread across 1,000 miles. A reason to keep talking. A blueprint for something beyond supply chains, for the connection we'd forged on that plane. I spent the day dissecting the proposal, identifying flaws and risks. It was solid, a smart move for my department. Agreeing was logical. But as I typed my reply, I knew logic had little to do with it. I was stepping off a cliff, guided by a fragile thread of possibility. Nora, I wrote, the concept has merit. Let's schedule a call to discuss parameters. It was the most calculated and reckless decision I'd ever made. Our collaboration began with sterile video calls. Nora, pixelated from her bright New York office, me, in my quiet Chicago space. 1,000 miles acted as a reassuring buffer. Project Atlas, as we codenamed it, was the perfect vessel. It demanded our best. I built ruthless, efficient back-end analytics. Nora crafted user-facing narratives, turning raw data, ships leaving ports, trucks crossing state lines, into story chapters. Our work styles clashed yet synergized. I was methodical, linear. She was iterative, conceptual. The loading dock scan is too clinical, she'd say, frowning at my flowchart. Reframe it as the journey begins. Use a stylized crane animation. We're moving promises, not boxes. Animation increases load time by 0.8 seconds. I'd counter. 7% drop-off in engagement. Make the files smaller, she'd shoot back, smiling. I trust your technical wizardry. And I would, spending hours problem-solving. She pushed me to see work as part of a human-centric experience, not just technical puzzles. Our logic and creativity wove something stronger than either could alone. Beneath professionalism, a new dynamic unfolded. Calls ran long. We strayed from agendas, talking restaurants, bad pottery attempts, ridiculous movie plots. Small exchanges built a bridge across miles. One afternoon, debating UI colors, me advocating for trust-inspiring blue, her for warm terracotta, she said. Blue is corporate, safe. Terracotta is earthy, grounding, the color of the first written stories. It's also the color of a flower pot, I said dryly. She laughed. You're relentlessly pragmatic. And you're a hopeless romantic masquerading as a strategist. The words hung in the digital air. Nora's expression softened. Her gaze intensified, as if she could see through the screen, through my walls. Maybe I am, she said quietly. Is that such a bad thing? I had no answer. The question echoed long after the call ended. I'd built life on pragmatism, rejecting the unquantifiable. But with Nora, I suspected those liabilities were what made things worth building. Project Atlas's blueprint solidified, but the unspoken thing growing between us terrified and captivated me. A face-to-face meeting became unavoidable. My company approved travel, and I flew to New York. No serendipity, just a scheduled meeting. Comforting, yet anxiety-inducing. Nora's office matched my imagination, a vibrant Soho loft with exposed brick, covered in mood boards and quotes. Creative energy buzzed, a stark contrast to my quiet department. Nora in her element was a revelation. She moved with grace, orchestrating designers, writers, coders, listening, sketching, encouraging. She was a leader, not just a manager. People created with her, not just for her. I spent the day in a conference room, hashing out technical specs with her and her lead developer. Familiar territory, code, databases, APIs. But my attention drifted. Through the glass wall, I watched her laugh with a junior designer, focus intently on wireframes, brush hair from her face when deep in thought. Meaningless data points, yet my mind cataloged them. I was an observer by nature, but never in such a personal context. It felt like intrusion, even as she stood in plain sight. That evening, after her team left, we ordered Thai food and spread project plans across the conference table. The office was quiet. City lights twinkled through warehouse windows. You're quiet tonight, Nora said, nudging pad CEW toward me. Just processing. I said, true, but not in the way she thought. Your team is loyal. A faint smile touched her lips. I trust them. I create space to take risks, to fail. Best ideas come after bad ones. Trust hung between us, the ghost at our feast. I thought of my old team, how I'd micromanaged them, fearing betrayal. I'd inspired efficiency, not loyalty. A well-oiled machine, not a creative space. That's not easy, I said quietly. No, she agreed, gaze holding mine. It requires faith. Silence fell. Only fork clinks and distant city hum. Professional boundaries blurred. Colleagues working late, yes, but two people sharing a meal's quiet intimacy with unspoken words between us. I looked at her, exhaustion under her eyes, whiteboard marker on her hand, genuine warmth in her smile. In that moment, the wall between professional admiration and personal attraction crumbled. Not dramatically, but quietly, inevitably. I was drawn to Nora Vance profoundly, terrifyingly, and it had nothing to do with Project Atlas. The New York trip shifted our dynamic. We were more comfortable, silences companionable. But as Project Atlas gained momentum, tension emerged. Securing higher funding meant greater risk, and my risk aversion slowed Nora's creative momentum. On a late-night call, reviewing the executive pitch deck, Nora advocated for a bold feature, a predictive algorithm suggesting ethically sourced alternatives to consumers. It's a brand statement, she said passionately. Transparency plus corporate responsibility. It's a logistical nightmare, I countered, screen filled with supply chain disruption risks. Data integration takes 6 months. Too ambitious for phase 1. Vulnerable. All ambitious projects are vulnerable. That's what makes them worthwhile, she retorted, frustration creeping in. Why are you so afraid to take a chance on this? On us. Us was ambiguous, project or something more, but it hit like a blow. Her question exposed my fear, not sound strategy. Silence. On screen, Nora's expression softened from frustration to concern. She'd struck a nerve.
Quinn, she said gently.
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to push you. I closed my eyes, Mark's triumphant smile flashing in my mind, the memory a cold knot in my stomach. Nora didn't press. She leaned back, New York skyline behind her. When I pitched brand strategy to my father, an investment banker, he showed me a spreadsheet. My success probability, starting salary, projected earnings.
Bleak.
She smiled wryly. He wanted data to scare me into law school. But I saw a story, he told himself, one where only the bottom line mattered. I wanted to write a different story. Her vulnerability was an invitation, not a demand for my secrets, but an offering of her own. And I stepped into it. He wasn't just my partner, I said, voice flat. I stared at my hands, not the camera. Mark was my best friend since college. We built everything from my tiny apartment. I trusted him implicitly. I breathed. The project was our baby. But he filed corporate paperwork listing himself as majority shareholder. A loophole in our agreement. I didn't read it because I trusted him. When we got investment, he took it. Pushed me out with a check covering student loans. Said it was just business. Silence hung heavy. I'd never told anyone the full story, raw, personal betrayal stripped of professional pretense. I looked up. Nora didn't pity me. She understood. That's not just business, she said softly. That's a blueprint for breaking, not building. In her words, I heard validation. She understood my fear wasn't about spreadsheets. It was about misplaced faith's devastating cost. And in that quiet, a tiny seed of faith began to sprout. We got the funding. Our joint presentation was synergy at its finest. I laid out data, architecture, logistics with cold precision. Nora breathed life into it, painting user experience, brand potential, emotional connection. Art and science, blueprint and story. Executives were unanimously impressed. To celebrate, Nora flew to Chicago, claiming a post-approval strategy session, but we both knew it was an excuse. The pretense of our relationship being solely professional was wearing thin. I chose a quiet, upscale West Loop restaurant. Minimalist, elegant, predictable. Nora, in a perfectly cut black dress, brought warmth the space lacked. Conversation flowed. Project next steps, Chicago architecture, her disastrous pottery attempts, a ridiculous movie we'd both seen. The mood was different, professional tension resolved, leaving something more personal, potent. An electrical current hummed between us, unspoken feelings hanging in the air. I watched candlelight catch gold flecks in her hazel eyes, the curve of her smile, the elegance of her gestures. Every detail confirmed the inevitable. After dinner, we walked along the river. Cool autumn air contrasted with warmth in my chest. City lights glittered on dark water. We stopped at a railing, staring at the skyline. Silence charged with unspoken words, late-night calls, shared frustrations, small victories, all leading to this. "I couldn't have done this without you, Quinn," Nora said softly, not looking at me. "The project wouldn't exist without your vision," I replied, voice strained. She turned, playful energy replaced by raw sincerity. "I'm not talking about the project." My breath caught. The world narrowed to the space between us. City noise faded. Just us, the river, and the thing that had grown between us. My mind, usually a whirlwind of analysis, went blank. I could only look at her, defenses dissolving in her gaze. She stepped closer. No touch, but I felt the pull. She lifted a hand as if to touch my face, then dropped it. Agonizing restraint. Then she leaned in, her lips brushing my cheek. A brief, light touch, like a promise. Not passion, but deep affection. A quiet acknowledgement of our journey and the one ahead. When she pulled back, her eyes held unreadable emotion. She gave a small, sad smile and walked toward the street to hail a cab, leaving me alone by the river, cheek tingling. Warmth and terror jolted through me, an unspoken accord, terms yet to be understood. The memory of that cheek kiss lingered, fragile, hopeful. Project Atlas moved into development, teams collaborating seamlessly. For the first time in years, I felt optimistic for my career, my life. Then Mark's ghost reappeared. It came as a forwarded email from my boss, Charles. Subject line: Industry buzz on Atlas. Sender: a senior executive at Mark's firm. A casual poison dart. Charles: heard buzz about your new transparency platform. Fascinating concept. Remarkably similar to a project my VP Mark Stanton developed years ago with his then-partner, Quinn Riley, I believe. Small world. Looking forward to your launch. Blood drained from my face. It was corporate sabotage at its finest. Insidious, deniable, devastating. No outright accusation, just outplanted about my integrity, my originality. It cast me as a junior partner, not the architect of the original concept. Charles called me in. He slid the email printout across his desk.
Quinn.
Anything you want to tell me? I explained the history with Mark, cold, clinical, laying out facts, betrayal, stolen intellectual property. Framing it as a past business dispute, draining it of personal venom. "I see," Charles said, steepling his fingers. "Unfortunate. Optics aren't great. We're backing you, but this buzz casts a shadow. Perception is reality." I walked back to my office in a daze. Cold dread coiled in my stomach. Mark hadn't just stolen my past, he was stealing my future. Using doubt as his weapon, poisoning the well. But my first thought was Nora. This project was hers as much as mine. Her reputation was tied to mine. The shadow over me stretched to New York, threatening her rising star. The thought was unbearable. He knew my weakness. My greatest fear wasn't failure, but being the cause of someone else's. He knew I'd retreat to protect those I cared about. Betrayal repeating itself. I was falling into the pattern. Self-preservation kicked in, twisted, self-destructive. I had to contain damage, build a firewall between Nora and me. If my reputation was tarnished, she wouldn't be. I sat at my desk, hands shaking, and pulled up email. Warmth and hope turned to ice. Mark's threat wasn't just to my career, it was to the fragile thing Nora and I were building. My only defense, I thought, was to tear it down before he could. The firewall went up, swift, cold, absolute. Daily communications with Nora ceased, replaced by sterile formality. I used only the official project portal, comments restricted to technical feedback. I CC'd both our bosses on every message, each email a brick in the wall. When she called, I sent it to voicemail. Quinn, it's me. I heard things. Call me, wanna know you're okay. Her concern felt like a knife twist. I deleted the message. A video conference was unavoidable. I kept my webcam off, citing poor connection. Spoke only when addressed, answers clipped. Quinn, your team flagged a potential integration delay, Nora said, voice trying to breach the wall. Let's brainstorm workarounds. No creative workarounds, I stated flatly. Resource allocation issue. Revised timeline in shared drive. We'll meet the deadline, no deviation. Stunned silence. I felt the team's confusion, Nora's hurt, radiating through the screen. Okay, she said, voice strained. Thank you for the update. I was protecting her, I told myself. Mark's poison was aimed at me. Distance kept her safe. If I was radioactive, she wouldn't be in the fallout. Logical, strategic, a sacrifice. But in silent evenings, logic felt like cowardice. I retreated to my cold, safe shell. The warmth Nora brought felt like a phantom ache. I buried myself in work, obsessive, joyless. Project Atlas would be an undeniable success. My work would speak for itself. Once a symbol of connection, it was now a fortress. Days bled into nights. Then a text from Nora. You built a world around trusting data, Quinn. But you're ignoring the most important data point of all. My heart pounded. I stared, confused. Another text. I'm not him. 3 words shattered my defenses. It wasn't an accusation, just fact. My strategy was flawed. I wasn't protecting her from Mark. I was protecting myself from the fear she might be like him. Punishing her for a crime she didn't commit. The wall wasn't to keep danger out, it was to keep my fear in. Radio silence wasn't strategy, it was a wound that never healed. I didn't reply. Admitting she was right meant admitting my past controlled me, that I'd treated her unfairly. I expected her to give up, to walk away. I deserved it. But Nora didn't operate on my defensive algorithms. A week later, my assistant buzzed. Quinn? Nora Vance is here, no appointment. My blood ran cold. Send her in. She walked in, calm, resolute, in a sharp gray suit, carrying a leather portfolio. No anger, no hurt, just purpose. She placed the portfolio on my desk. I don't like people messing with my projects. Or my partners. She slid a tablet across. The screen showed a dossier. I did some digging, she said, factual. Mark has a history. 2 years before you, he was at a Boston firm, developed financial modeling software. His senior partner left right before Series A. Mark got promoted. A year after pushing you out, he joined his current firm. 3 team members filed complaints about him stealing credit. Settled quietly. And here, she pointed to a link. A tech blog profile of his firm's new platform. Remarkably similar to our early Atlas concept, discussed on our first call, before the project was official. I stared at the screen, mind reeling. Nora hadn't confronted me with emotion. She'd countered with strategy. Data, pattern, irrefutable proof. She'd fought for me in my language. He's not just discrediting you, she said, voice softening. He's scared. Atlas is better than anything he can build. He's poisoning the well because he knows we'll win. This was reversal, not drama, but strategic takedown. She hadn't tried to heal my wound. She'd given me a shield and sword, forged from loyalty and brilliance. She'd shown me, with data, she was a mark. She was my ally. I looked up at her. Her hazel eyes were steady, waiting. No gratitude demanded, just a demonstration of who she was. In that sterile office, surrounded by evidence of her belief in me, my last defenses melted. I felt exposed, raw, and utterly seen. For a long moment, I said nothing. The tablet's information hummed with power, testament to Nora's loyalty. Silence held the weight of my foolishness, my fear. I'd fought a ghost, almost sacrificing something real. Why? I whispered. Why do this? Nora closed the portfolio. Because I believe in our work. She met my gaze. And I believe in you. There it was, the truth I couldn't accept. Her faith wasn't naive, it was a choice, even after seeing my worst self. I stood, walking to the window, back to her. Chicago's rigid skyline, once comforting, now felt like a cage. I'd let my past imprison me, holding the key without realizing it. My adult life had been a reaction to Mark's betrayal, career built on risk mitigation, personality on emotional austerity, trust as liability, vulnerability as flaw. I'd seen Nora's warmth as a threat, not a partner. And she'd seen me, the person beneath the analyst. She'd seen my fear and armed me against it, not run from it. I turned back. She stood by my desk, calm, patient, giving me space to process. Another gift, another act of respect. "I'm sorry, Nora," I said, words heavy. I let my past dictate my response. "I shut you out. It was wrong." A small, sad smile touched her lips. "Your past is part of your story. No need to apologize. But it can't be the only chapter." I walked back, desk no longer a barrier. "I don't know how to do this trusting thing." Her expression softened. She stepped closer, placing a hand gently on my arm. Warm, steady, a point of connection in chaos. "You don't have to know," she said softly. "We can figure it out. Together." Warmth spread through me, thawing the last of my icy heart. In that moment, surrounded by her loyalty and strength, I made a choice, not based on data, but faith. I chose to believe her. I leaned in, resting my forehead against hers briefly, a gesture of surrender, gratitude, new beginning, admission of what I couldn't say, acceptance of what she offered. The reckoning wasn't with Mark, but with myself. And for the first time, I felt like I might win. The next morning, we walked into Charles's office together, a unified front. We didn't present Nora's dossier as an attack. We framed it as proactive IP defense. I laid out Mark's history, now with corroborating evidence of his past actions. Nora pivoted to the future, showcasing Atlas's market differentiation, subtly highlighting the competitor's potential infringement. Strategic masterstroke, not just defending, but going on the offensive, professionally. We controlled the narrative. Charles listened, expression shifting from concern to impressed resolve. He saw Nora's evidence as a defense of my character and a competitive advantage. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," he said firmly. "We won't let this project be undermined. Legal will handle it discreetly. You two focus on building the future." As we left, profound relief washed over me. The shadow was gone, dispelled by competence and solidarity. The crisis forged our partnership into something unbreakable. Tested by my past's malice, we emerged stronger. Professional respect had always been there, personal affection had grown. Now, there was deep, unshakable trust, earned under fire. Our work dynamic shifted. Creative tension remained, but without my anxiety. I took calculated risks, trusted her intuition when data was inconclusive, learning the difference between reckless gambles and visionary leaps. Personal interactions eased into comfort. Late-night calls included days, dreams, ordinary details. We learned each other's languages. Nora's creative bursts followed by introspection, my silence as deep thought, not disapproval. I introduced her to organized spreadsheets. She convinced me to browse a Brooklyn bookstore for hours, no agenda. It wasn't a fairy tale. Ambitious careers in different cities meant missed calls, rescheduled trips, loneliness. But when stress made me revert to coldness, Nora saw through it. "That's your world is ending voice," she'd say gently. "Tell me what's scaring you." She listened, steady and calm, reminding me I wasn't building a fortress alone anymore. I was slowly dismantling the fortress I'd lived in, slow, deliberate, like learning to walk again. Stumbles, moments of fear, but now I had a hand to hold. Our relationship wasn't dramatic romance. It was quiet construction, built on respect and hard-won trust, one small act of vulnerability at a time. 6 months after Atlas's launch, Now a multi-award-winning platform, I was on another flight. The engine's hum was comforting, but everything was different. I sat in the window seat, Nora beside me, her head on my shoulder, asleep. Her FinTech quarterly lay open on her lap. We weren't flying for work, no conferences, no meetings. We were going to a small Maine coastal town for a week with no agenda, no deadlines. I looked at her peaceful face, calm settling over me. Nora had reconfigured my internal landscape. I'd once seen life as destinations, goals, risk mitigation, focused on arrival, on plan completion. Nora taught me to appreciate the flight. She showed me life's most valuable things are unquantifiable: shared laughter, comfortable silences, a partner who believes in you when you don't. She didn't fix me or heal my wounds. She created a safe space for me to heal myself. The past year was a lesson in calculated risk. The biggest risk, trusting her, yielded the greatest return. Not charitable or spreadsheet-worthy, but felt in my steady breathing, in the joy of sitting beside her at 30,000 feet. She stirred, eyes fluttering open. A sleepy, soft smile, just for me. "Are we there yet?" she murmured. "Almost," I said, thumb tracing her hand. I looked out the window, not at the ground, but at the vast blue sky, an ocean of possibility. For the first time, the future didn't feel like territory to conquer. It felt like an open horizon. I still believed in data, logic, strategy. But now I understood. The most important journeys have unknown destinations. The purpose isn't arrival. It's who you have beside you as you fly into the mystery, ready for whatever turbulence comes, together. As the plane began its descent, Nora squeezed my hand. I leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead, a quiet promise, a celebration of the flight we'd shared and the one ahead. The world below grew closer, but in that moment, all that mattered was the warmth of her beside me and the endless horizon of possibilities stretching out before us.